We wanted to know what happens to people after being in hospital for a heart attack, for myocardial infarction, in particular the outcomes in regard to whether or not people were readmitted for heart trouble or for anything else, and for whether or not they survived. And to look at that by some of the important risk factors that are known to be associated with those outcomes, being whether or not they have diabetes, male or female, and in particular the socioeconomic status. And then to try and unpick that and try and find out if there are differences between groups. Can we explain it in terms of the way that people have been treated during the original admission or afterwards? Some of it was very expected. We found that of course older people, people with diabetes and, as has been reported many times before, people from more disadvantaged areas all did worse in terms of the likelihood of being readmitted or the likelihood of surviving. Interestingly, when we then looked at how people were treated during and just after their admission, we saw that for some of these risk factors, particularly for diabetes, it did look like there was efforts being made to overcome this problem, in that there was more likelihood of being on medications that we know are preventative for further heart trouble, and certainly at least as many people getting bypasses and angioplasties and stents which keep their blood vessels open if they had diabetes. But for those people who were from more disadvantaged areas, there really seemed to be a shortfall in the proportion of people who had these sort of life-saving interventions, such as bypass operation, and that really seems to be something that is a problem that we face and something that is an opportunity to do something about, to improve outcomes for people. We looked at both, and you're absolutely right. Understanding socioeconomic disadvantage is complex and it has many different components. The metric that we used was one based on where you live, so it wasn't something that we could apply to each individual, but nevertheless where you live has often been shown to be a pretty good marker of a socioeconomic advantage and disadvantage. And so there are many factors that play into this and many of them are structural. They relate to the environment that people live and work in. And it's things like availability of healthcare, it's things like health literacy. Many people living in socioeconomically disadvantaged areas don't have English as their first language, and so understanding what it is that they need and demanding the best treatments is something that may be a challenge for such people. And the ability for the health services to provide everything that is required also varies by location. We certainly did find that things that should happen in hospital, being the procedures, the bypasses, the stents, the opening up of the arteries, seemed to be where there was the biggest shortfall for people in socially disadvantaged